Hi, everyone. It is Wednesday. Good to see you all jumping on. Hi, Kelly. Mwah. Hi, Lori. Hi, Leslie. Hi, Michelle. Hi, Pat. Hi, Sue. I'm just going to give it, hi, Karen, a moment to get people on. We're talking about purification today. So actually, what I would love to hear from people as you're jumping on is I want to know how you're all doing these days. So I asked this question literally yesterday in my yoga class, and the answers were so interesting. Some people are like, oh, my body's really hurting this week. Other people are like, my emotions are all over the place. Other people were like, I'm feeling good. So I'm really curious to hear from those of you who want to share in the chat box what's going on, because I'm going to explain. We're in this like really interesting week energetically. And so I'm just curious. Brenda is all over the place. Kimberly, your relationships are under fire. Margaret's tired, but good. I had a big portion of people in my class yesterday were like, I'm good. Kathy is happy to be here. I am so happy to have you here, Kathy. My entire world has burned to the ground. Neva or Neva, I don't know how you say it. I'm sorry to hear that. And of course, we know that something always grows up out of the burning down, but sending you strength. May is challenging for Kathleen. Amber, so happy that you're here as well. Body aching from yoga. Everything is a challenge right now, says Lori. Little impatience for Karen. Suzanne is traveling. Beautiful. So let's talk about sort of where we're at. I am always a very energetic teacher. I think I've always been a very energetically sensitive human. And then as I learned more about energy, I've been able to sort of hone it even more. And this week, energetically, I sense into it's wild, right? It's really wild. So Monday was Beltane, which is that exact middle point between spring and summer. So there's no doubt that spring is here, right? You can see new life, new growth everywhere around you, but there's an intensity that comes with that. Yes, there's lots going on just in the outer world. So a lot is going on in our inner worlds as well, because it's a reflection. So that was Monday. And Beltane is usually very celebratory. So what's interesting, what I'm feeling in myself is I don't feel that celebratory yet. I feel sort of heavy and sluggish. It feels very, for me, energetic. I feel it in my body. And so this idea of like, okay, here we are, spring is here, let's celebrate, let's move, let's do. I'm stuck. I'm a little stuck. I'm not really feeling it yet. Some of you might be feeling it more. I'm just expressing sort of my experience. But what we're coming up to on Friday is a big lunar eclipse. And eclipses are a time of major shift, major change. And this particular lunar eclipse is a really big purging eclipse. So you could think of this week as like this time that stuff is rising up to the surface for you to really let it go. Friday is a beautiful day to really make some conscious choices to let some things go. And you can do this in many ways. You can journal, you can burn, you can, you can just set intention. What I need to release today, I'm releasing. I would suggest that on a lunar eclipse like Friday, you rest. So it's not a day that we want to be super active, taking on new things, doing lots of activities. As much as you can, if you can on Friday, just create a little space for yourself to allow whatever needs to come up and out to release it. That would be ideal. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about purging and releasing. We're talking about how we can really purify our systems. And I have been, interestingly enough, craving purification at the same time that I'm resistant to it. So there's this like push pull of like, I'm craving like clearing and purifying, lightening my load, cleaning my closets. And there's a part of me that's like, oh, but not yet. Like, we all put things off that we know we really need. So that's, maybe you're experiencing that too. So let's get into some nuts and bolts. Most of the content today really is coming from my study in Ayurveda and yoga, because there are so many purification practices in the yoga world, and I find them really helpful for us in all aspects of our life. Now, I found this Rumi quote, which I thought, oh, this is perfect. Whatever purifies you is the right path. I will not try to define it. And so here today, I'm going to try to define some purification practices, but I think I will sit with Rumi on this, that I'm going to offer a lot. Some of it may not be your path. Some of it might really resonate. Some of it you might feel resistance to. And I would say, examine when you feel resistance. Sometimes our resistance is a sign that we need to go for it. Other times our resistance is that, no, this really isn't right for me. So you'll get to really listen and tune in and be your own judge of what's going to be right for you. Okay, let's dive into this. So you all know, I always put this in there just because sometimes there's new people. There might be some new people on the call and you're like, who is this person talking about purification? And I always put this slide in too, just to sort of continue to define that sort of, I really feel like my work is to bring yoga and psychology together in a clear, concise way. So this is what we're doing today. We're going to talk about purification, what heaviness is like, how we can purify, and give you some tips. So there's so many ways we can define purification. I mean, a basic way is just like ridding yourself of toxins. But the yogis and a lot of Eastern philosophy would say purification is all about creating a stronger vessel so that you can hold more energy. And this really is what I think all of the yoga purifications are about. We want to cleanse out what is toxic to our systems. And that's not just physical toxins, that can be emotional, psychological toxins, so that our vessel is really strong and actually bigger. The yogis talk a lot about expanding our vessel so that we can literally hold more life force. We can hold more prana. We have more energy to actually engage in the world and do the things that we're here to do. So I think of self-purification not as something that's vain or even to make yourself look better or even to feel better. It's simply because I want to hold more prana. I want to hold more vibrancy, more life force. So I really, really, truly believe that purification processes are not only like a necessity, but they're also our personal responsibility. So let's start with the necessity piece. Let's face it, we live in such a toxic world. We all know this, right? The chemicals that are in the air, the processed foods that we consume, the unresolved emotions that we're still carrying in our body, psychological stressors, political world, right? There's so much that's really toxic around us all of the time. And inevitably, what our system is trying to do, and when I'm saying our system, I do mean our body, our energy, and our mind. And we're going to talk about those three today. We're always trying to digest and assimilate what we're taking in. And because we're trying to digest and assimilate, and a lot of it is toxic, this builds up in our system, and it can build up and show up as pain. It can show up as irritability. It can show up as crankiness. It really starts to compromise our well-being. This time of year, spring in particular, is the time of year to purify yourself. We often, you'll see a lot of sort of ads or encouragement at the start of a new year to cleanse and to let go of all the holiday weight that you put on or what you ingested over the holidays. But January is the worst time to cleanse. Usually when we're in those winter months, that is not a time to purify. We're supposed to be sort of taking in. This is now the prime time of the year to be really conscious about releasing. And you're going to hear me talk today. This is not necessarily, it could be releasing body weight, but this is also releasing energetic weight, psychological weight, what we've sort of been literally carrying on our backs. This is the time to really seek to purify and let it go. And then why it's our responsibility. I feel really fiery about this lately for many reasons. We live in these vessels, just like we live in our homes. It's our responsibility to keep our home clean, to pick up the garbage, to, put things away. That is our responsibility. It's the same way with this vessel we're in. It is our responsibility to keep it in order, to take care of it. And not only for ourselves, because, to get a human life is a really precious thing. And we're all here for many beautiful reasons, all of us slightly different. And so, we got to take care of this, right? If we're going to do our work in the world, our vessel needs to be as purified and cleaned as possible. It's also our responsibility, because if the stuff inside of us isn't dealt with, the junk inside, it does bleed out. And it impacts the people around us. It impacts the people we live with, our children, our workplace people, right? It bleeds out. I worked with someone once who had a parent who was a pretty intense hoarder. And this person talked about how not only was it anxiety provoking and upsetting when they were younger because they didn't want to bring friends home, but as this person moved out of the house, but didn't want to come back. And so her parents' decision to not deal with their stuff bled out so much into her own life. It's the same way with this internal space. If we're not doing our due diligence and taking care of what's going on inside of here, it is going to impact people outside of us. And so this is why it feels so important that this is our responsibility. And we all have stuff to clean up in here, right? So you might be saying, well, how do I know what's in there that I have to clean up? Well, if we keep, and I'm with everyone with this, when you get triggered, there's something to clean up. When you start fighting with something on the outside, you get offended by someone on the outside, that's all our inner work in here. When our inside is sometimes, for lack of better words, sort of dirty, it's so much easier to go to the outside and get caught up in the problems of other people or other situations or things going on in the world instead of attend to ourselves. Because maybe I can clean up the outer world, or I can control my family member, or I can make this better in the outer world. It sort of takes us away from the honest of having to go in and do the work of making sure we're purifying and clearing ourselves out. This is hard, but this is it. I feel like this is it. This is our responsibility. This is sort of our core, work in this world, because then we show up so much more effective in how we live in the external world, and we show up so much more neutral. So we're not getting thrown all about by the chaos and the toxicity that's out there, because it's out there. You all know that. That's probably not going to change. So if we can keep this inside more purified, then we're not messing up the external as much. So what does this heaviness, or how do we know? Again, I gave you some examples, like if you're irritable, you're road ragey, all of it, yeah, that means there's some stuff in there. in particular in the spring, we do feel a lot of heaviness. And what does this mean? What does this feel like? So there's some things on here that are physical. There's some things on here that are more psychological or emotional. But yeah, our body feels heavy. We might have really slow bowel movements. We're bloated. We're carrying extra weight. We can't get out of bed. We don't have any inspiration. We're feeling stuck, sort of complacent. And we might also feel very clingy, right? This is a real sign of stuck energy. We're clingy to people. We're clingy to things, right? Like cleaning out those closets, bringing stuff to, Goodwill or wherever you take it, right? It's like, I can't let go. That's a sense of just kind of this stuck energy in the system. So the yogis have a particular practice, it's considered as observation called Saucha. And it means purity, clean, sacred. It's one of the niyamas. So there's 8 limbs of yoga. They're the different practices of yoga. And one of the limbs is the yamas and the niyamas. And Saucha is a niyama. It's an observance. It's something we should be observing in ourselves. And there's so many ways we can think about Saucha. I mean, of course, just even keeping the body clean is part of this. But if we take it a little bit deeper, it's really doing the work that I've just been talking about, like clearing out those inner blocks. So the yogis have lots of physical breath practices to purify, but they also have something, and I'm not going to go into this really deeply, but it's fascinating. They have something called the Shatkarmas. And these are 6 really deep cleansing practices. So this shows you how important purification is in the yoga tradition. These, again, are not things you necessarily would do every day, except for maybe Kapalbhati breathing. But these are more things you would do once or twice a year, or based on what your health situation is, you might do more. I don't teach any of these except for Kapalbhati breathing in some of my yoga classes. But I did years and years ago go on a weekend training with some yoga teachers in Chicago, and we did all of these practices. So we did the enemas, and we did. So let me just talk you through it again. I wouldn't feel like I have enough training to guide someone through this, but I just want you to know there are really deep cleansing practices. And I do, if people want recommendations or referrals, I do have Ayurvedic doctors that I can send you to, who if you feel like I need a really deep cleanse right now, there's good people that I could send you to. So I actually think I'm not going to go into what these all are because I don't teach them. I have practiced them and they're powerful. The point is that the yogis are big, big, big on purification. So why is Saucha purification such a big deal? Well, this beautiful photo is a depiction of something called Kundalini rising. And I'm sure many, if maybe not all of you, have heard of this concept. It's somewhat misunderstood often, but it's this idea that coiled at the base of our spine is Kundalini energy, which is it's depicted here by snakes, but it's simply life force, it's vitality, it's purity, it's potential. It's the energy of awakening. And throughout the course of our lives, we all have Kundalini rising moments. So you are on a beach and you watch a gorgeous sunset and you feel alive and one with the world, right? That is a Kundalini moment. You have a moment in deep conversation with a loved one and you have a welling up of gratitude for their presence in your life. That is Kundalini rising. You might be driving in your car and a deep piece of wisdom drops in about something you need to know or understand in your life. That is Kundalini rising. So this is not a rare thing. Almost all of us have experienced this, right? But the yogis say we want more of these experiences. This is our birthright to be so vitally engaged, to have all this life force flowing up our spine and out through the crown of our head. And so this is why we purify. We need a strong vessel. We need a strong body for this energy to really flow and move through. And the more we purify and do our practices, we are preparing ourselves to have more of this rising energy. So we purify so that we can be more daily or more readily in our essence, essentially, right? The greatness of who we are. So I'm throwing this in just because I think it's really curious. Do y'all know what this is? This is caduceus, which is the symbol for the medical symbol. Wow, what does that look like? Yeah, so some of you may know this, but the central channel there is the central channel of the body. And then with these two energies that sort of wrap around the central channel, this all comes from yoga philosophy. So it's very fascinating that the medical symbol is actually a representation of exactly what we're talking about, Kundalini rising, and why we need purification practices so we get more of that vital life force rising up through our body. So all this is to say, purification is really key. So I want to take a moment. You guys can certainly throw in that chat box, because sometimes just expressing it and having other people see it is good accountability for ourselves. Or you may just jot it down in a journal or just sit with what is loading you down right now. So if you're really just to stop and think, like, what is my heaviest load right now? You know, is it my work? Is it my relationship? Am I stuck in some addiction? Does my body feel weighed down and tired and heavy? Like, what is it that needs purification? What is it that is my heaviest load right now? So even though I just shared, there's all these purification practices, and I showed you that complicated, like all these, you know, seemingly crazy things that you can do. What I want to talk about is really simplistic things that purification looks different for all of us. It doesn't have to be earth-shattering. It doesn't actually have to be that complicated or hard, but we have to be clear on what we're even carrying. It could be physical, it could be energetic, emotional. It's probably all of those. But yeah, thanks for sharing. Some people are carrying a lot of emotional reactivity. Nick says the news feels really heavy. Yeah, I'm just going to curiously throw this out there. Maybe you could not watch it as much, or maybe avoid it if that feels like it's something you could do for a while, and see if that changes some of the heaviness. Sleep is a challenge. Yeah, old stories, right? That we're really stuck in, repetitive stories. We're going to talk about that, Brenda, tonight or today. Difficult coworkers. Yeah, difficult, challenging people in our life. There's lots of, you know, again, people around us that can be very challenging for us. Hormonal, menopausal stuff, long COVID stuff. Yeah, so lots of, you know, and as I'm looking at all of these, I'm like, oh yeah, I can relate to that. Oh yeah. You know, so these are very human things that we all get very weighed down. I love this picture of this little Swiss woman in the Alps with her big load on top, because that's sometimes how it feels. It's like we're carrying so much. So I want to talk about, again, the purification of the body, of our energy, and of our mind. So those are the three categories. We're going to just give some tools. We're going to do a couple practices, very brief. What are ways that I can lighten up? What are the things that I can start to do to not feel so heavy? This is, again, spring is the time of the year where we tend to feel most heavy. We're coming off of winter. And again, I mean heavy physically, emotionally, energetically. So we're going to start in the body. I'm not going to spend that much time here, because these are sort of like no-does. We know this. As we're going into spring, we need to lighten up our diets. We need to really hydrate. So in the spring, I often go on a spring cleanse. It's an Ayurvedic spring cleanse. And so it's sort of a 2-week, you prep yourself for it. And then the second week is when you really go into a very mono diet. Again, I'm not going to go into lots of details around it because I don't teach this. I don't feel like I'm an expert in it. I have teachers that I go to who help me with it. But one of the things I've learned from cleansing a lot in the, last decade is that one of the key things is you have to start to hydrate. Drink, 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 drink. Put some lemon in, maybe put some ginger in, but really, and room temperature or hot water is much more efficient at helping you purge out toxins than cold water. So if you're an ice water drinker, see if you can maybe switch to more room temperature or even hotter water. Sweating is so good right now. So that could come from moving, that could come from sauna, come from hot showers, but really, again, purifying. Tongue cleaning. I meant to bring my tongue cleaner. This is a very Ayurvedic thing. We start to get a lot of toxins on our tongue. So you could go to Amazon right now and find a tongue scraper, and you, in the morning, before you drink anything, you scrape your tongue 3, 4, 5 times. Twists are great, yoga twist. And then we think of our body just as our physical body, but, the yoga traditions that talk about these separate layers of us often include our environment as sort of part of our body. So even just something as simple as cleansing out your garage, your closets can do really wonders for lightening up the body as well. So that's all I'm going to talk about with the body. We're going to go a little bit more into the energy, how we purify our energy, because it is more esoteric. But I will say it's really efficient and quick. So purifying the body, like I'm on this cleanse right now. It's going to be a full 2 weeks that I'm on this cleanse, and really seeing the results in my body. The body's the densest part of us, so it takes the longest to change. We can purify our energy really quickly, and we can purify the mind. Mind is the hardest one. I'm leaving that for last, but energy is something we can really work pretty efficiently with. So the realm of energy, the energy layer that we all contain, it's about 1 inch off the body. And this is emotions live in our energy body. If you know anything about the chakra system, that's lives in the energy body. And specifically, the chakra I want to address today is our 5th chakra. It's our throat chakra. It's right in the center of the throat, centered sort of between the back of the neck and the throat. In Sanskrit, we call it Vishuddha. And Vishuddha is actually translated to mean in-depth purification. So in-depth, this is the purification chakra. So if we're talking about purifying, we got to understand what's going on in our throats and our necks. So what is the throat chakra about? It's about communication. It's about speaking truth. It's about being heard. It's about being seen. It's about putting our unique ideas and creations out into the world. You also, if you just palpate your neck a little bit, there are a lot of lymph nodes in your neck. So if we talk about this as a purification, this is sort of where we have protection against bacteria and virus. And so the throat and the neck is sort of a protective barrier for us. The throat chakra is also considered the first spiritual chakra. So the very earthly chakras, which are very human, are 1, 2, 3, root, sacral, solar plexus. The spiritual chakras are throat, third eye, crown. So this is the first spiritual chakra. So this is where we really start to be more in touch with our higher self. Now, the throat is the gateway between our heart and our head. So this part of the body energetically gets really notoriously stuck because we're all trying to figure out how to sort of bridge the gap between our compassion and our intellect, or between what our heart is telling us and what our head says we should do, right? So there's often a lot of challenge between sort of taking a more earthly stance or more of a spiritual stance. And a lot of the tension can show up in the throat and the neck. Now, the other big piece I want to bring to your attention today is that every one of these energy centers in the body has what's called the demon of that chakra. And I don't really like that word, but it is also actually, I think, quite descriptive. So there's something that can really block the energy flow. And each chakra has a different sort of major block or demon. The one for the throat is lies and dishonesty. And we have to all be honest with ourselves first and foremost, that we all lie, right? We all have white lies. I can't come tonight because my cat is sick or whatever, right? We all say things to, make it smoother, not create waves, right? But we don't ever consider that maybe some of that is really blocking and mucking up our system. So there's a really great book that I really love by Martha Beck. It was a powerful read for me. And her story is really fascinating. She's a PhD coach and was a professor, and she's well known. She's written lots of books. But she writes in this book about a decision she made to no longer lie, and how hard this was, that she didn't realize how many little things she was not speaking truth about, or she was holding back, or she wasn't allowing to flow through her. And her commitment over the course of a year to not tell any lies, and how hard it was, and how freeing and lightening and joyful she became because of this. So one of the things she offers in this book is to try an integrity cleanse. And so the word integrity, she says, means wholeness. Living in integrity means expressing and doing what's true for you in all situations. She writes that when we depart from your truth in any way, when we offer a fake smile, we flatter our awful boss, we marry for money, we become two people. We become the truth knower and the lie actor. And so there's duplicity there. And duplicity is the real enemy of joy, is what she believes. So she says, to start the integrity cleanse, you ask yourself, where am I out of integrity? Where am I having feelings that I'm not allowing myself to feel? Or what am I knowing that I'm not speaking? Or what am I holding back? She said, once you identify that duplicity in yourself, come back in integrity, speak your truth, act on it no matter what. So it's a really interesting concept. If any of you are sort of mildly interested in this, I definitely would get this book. But starting to really just, I think that the major step is being truthful to yourself. And I know that one of my, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, we're going to talk about the sort of stories, that the repetitive stories we keep coming around to in our life. One of my repetitive patterns is people pleasing. But what people pleasing requires sometimes is that you move out of integrity, because I may have a need and a desire, but if I'm going to please the person next to me, it means that I have to come out of integrity and maybe not be fully honest to make sure that they're okay. So, there are reasons why this can be really hard, this way of integrity, but I think she's really onto something, that there is lightness and joy when we start with being really honest and truthful first with ourselves. All right, so purifying our energy. Here's a couple other ideas for you to think about. Taking a media diet. I've kind of been doing that lately. I really have sort of an allergy with my phone lately. So for those of you who I haven't called or texted back, I apologize, but it's just, I'm really like I think it's because I'm trying to purify and cleanse right now, and it feels very heavy sometimes. So what's a media diet? You just choose to not be on your phone. You might want to let people know that, because otherwise people do get somewhat offended. Where are you? And then I already talked a little bit about this contemplation, this way of integrity. So these are the two practices I want to teach you for purifying your energy. And I think I'm going to start first with the Mudra of Purification, because it's really simple. So it's the thumb resting at the base of the ring finger, but sort of close to the middle finger. This is the Mudra of Purification. Mudras are hand positions, and they really shift our subtle energy. They often shift sort of our mood state. And this is such a beautiful mudra because you can hold this. In fact, I've been trying to just hold this more at various times when I'm sitting and waiting because I am trying to really purify right now. And this mudra is thought to really bring more awareness into the throat, the neck. So this Vishuddha chakra brings more circulation to our thyroid and then helps us let go of limiting beliefs. So this is a great one that you can just start to apply in your life whenever. You can't hold it too long, and even just holding it a little bit of time. And you don't have to hold your hands up here by your shoulders, by the way. Your hands can be down in your lap. So this is the Mudra of Purification, really simple. Now, the other one that I want to teach is Kapalbhati Breathing. And a lot of you are really in-depth yogis, so you know this one, but some of you on this call might not be aware of Kapalbhati. And I have to admit, I've been drawn to teaching this more in my classes. And then as I was reviewing what it does, I was like, oh yeah, I feel really heavy lately. That's why I'm wanting to do Kapalbhati, because it's such a releasing. I feel too like I'm carrying some abdominal excess right now. And this is one that really starts to clear up and shake that out. This is also, we call this pranayama. So there's lots of breath techniques in yoga, but if we go back to this slide, it's actually a Shatkarma. So of these 6 things that people, really powerful purifications, Kapalbhati is the only breath practice on here. So it is a powerful one. Now, I'm going to give you there's a couple caveats. If you have untreated high blood pressure, or sort of a history of heart issues, or you tend towards mania. And we know in terms of if you have bipolar, mania can often spike in the spring. This would be something you would want to avoid. For people new to this, it can feel a little uncomfortable, but once you get a hang of it, it's pretty powerful. So the key with Kapalbhati is it's a forceful exhale through the nose. I always say it's like you're blowing out a candle with your nose. So it's forceful. And as you're forcefully exhaling, your solar plexus down here starts to really move. You probably need a Kleenex too if you do this, by the way. So you start to feel a lot of sort of sensation in your solar plexus. You don't really have to worry about the inhale. So usually it's the opposite. If you think about breath, we think about the inhale and the exhale just happens. This is the opposite. We think about the exhale and the inhale just happens, right? So you see all the benefits of this. I would start with, and people who are very adept at this will do it very quickly. It looks like this. I do not like this. If you practice a long time, totally fine. But for people that are new to this, it feels very overwhelming, almost like you're hyperventilating. So I always say 1 to 2 forceful exhales per second. So it's more like this. And I'm just focused on the exhale and that pumping of the belly. The inhale happens automatically without thought, okay? The sort of practice you might do, if you're new to this, I would do 20 of them. Start there. If you're practiced at this, or you have a strong yoga practice, the classic teaching is 3 rounds of 36. So you do 36 pumps and then you pause because you'll feel a lot. Then you do 36 more pumps and you pause, and then you do a final round. Means you get 108 pumps in, and that's a very auspicious, powerful number in all wisdom traditions. So this is a really good one. Jennifer's practicing it. It is not bellows breath, Barb. That's a great question. Bellows breath is sharp inhale, sharp exhale, sharp inhale, sharp exhale. We did it last month in Wisdom Wednesday. We did bellows breath. It's also purifying. It's a great one. And I would say for more beginners, I recommend bellows breath first, but it is slightly different. So it's because you're focusing on the inhale, pause, and then the exhale, pause. Whereas Kapalbhati is just that forceful exhale. The inhale happens automatically. Let's do 20 together, shall we? So let me talk you through this. don't do this if you're driving or if Jennifer said her dog is concerned about her. So let your weight come back over your sit bones. This is really key that we get rooted back, we get rooted down, because this brings a lot of energy to the crown of the head. So we need to first make sure we're really stable in the base of the body. Take a nice deep breath in through the nose. You're going to release 3/4 of the breath through the nose and then forceful exhale 20 times. All right, that was 20. You do feel a lot of sensation in the throat because we're pure. Remember, this is the purification center. Often coughing can happen too in between rounds. So this is all normal. So any questions? Margaret, this is such a good question. This is a super energizing practice. Do not do it before bed. Ideally, you're doing Kapalbhati breath on an empty stomach. If you have a lot of food in there, it's not dangerous. It's just not going to feel comfortable. So it feels best on an empty stomach, and it is a highly energizing, purifying, just like twist can be really energizing as well. So these are things ideally you're not doing at night. You're not doing before you're trying to fall asleep. A more calming breath would be alternative nostril breathing. This would be the ideal time to practice Kapalbhati is you get up, instead of reaching for your cup of coffee right away, you have an empty stomach, use this to clear out stagnancy, do your 3 rounds, and then go drink your coffee. And you might not even need your coffee because you're so, awakened with Kapalbhati breath. Little tip, little secret. I practice Kapalbhati breath sometimes if I'm driving during the day and I'm tired. I'll just, because I know it will energize my system and I don't want to fall asleep. You don't need to sit on the floor like this. Yeah, sorry, this this picture. I mean, I can't sit like that, right? You can do it anywhere. The ideal thing is that you need an upright spine. So that's why I asked you to sort of settle back, settle over your sit bones, but make sure you have because this is your core energy, your Sushumna Nadi, we call it. So you want that to be aligned and straight. You don't want to be slouched over trying to do Kapalbhati breath, but you do not have to sit cross-legged. You do not have to sit back on your heels. You can sit in a chair. Okay. Any other questions about this? I love Kapalbhati breath. It's just preparing for this. I'm like, okay, Betsy, every morning, bring this in while you're cleansing. So that's my plan. Okay. So we did the Mudra of Purification. So now, y'all, I don't know if we have enough time for this, but we are going to try and talk about the mind, purifying the mind. And Ove, this is a big one. And this is a really hard one. This is the hardest one. The mind is in yoga philosophy the most constricted aspect of who we are. It's more constricted than our body. It's more constricted than our energy. It's a very constricted aspect of how we perceive and experience the world. We have some control over our thoughts, but we don't have full control over our thoughts. And that's simply because we have 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. So you cannot have full control over your thoughts. And there's some ideas that, 90+% of what we think each day is what we thought yesterday. So there's some patterning when we're stuck in these loops. We were thinking about this last month, and so we're still thinking about it. We've been thinking about this since childhood. These are the thoughts that are coming through. So, we are not our thoughts, which is a really deep and important concept that we're not going to get into today. But thoughts are simply a manifestation of our brain, just like our heart's designed to pump blood through the body. Our brain is designed to create thought, but we can't always trust everything that goes through our mind. And we have to really acknowledge and understand that we all have a negative mindset. This is called the negativity bias. It's scientifically studied by a psychologist named Dr. Rick Hansen. For all of us, based on how we've evolved as humans, we tend to overestimate threats in our life, and then we underestimate resources and opportunities. So we're all going around sort of believing the world to be a much scarier and more negative place than it actually is, with this belief that there's not enough for us. So this is just how we've evolved, how our brains are evolved. It's the truth of our mind. So once I really started to understand the truth of my mind, I gave it less power, and I started to realize that that I wanted to rely more on my body and my energy and my heart for guidance than necessarily my mind. Now, I love my mind, right? I love my capacity to critically analyze things and make lists and follow through on things. I mean, I'm very grateful for this mind, but I do understand that there are limits. So purifying your mind is really important, but I would say it's not as, that energy work we just did is immediate. We already talked about purifying the body takes a slightly longer period of time. And the mind, our minds can change on a dime, right? You can make a decision on a dime. Like, I was going to do this, but now I'm doing something different. So our minds we can actually change our thought pattern really quickly, but there are these, in Sanskrit, what we call samskaras or ruts. We might talk about them as repetitive stories that we're stuck in, and it can be really hard to get ourselves out of the ruts. So these are some very basic things about how we purify our mind. But really, as I was thinking through this, the very first step is we first have to become conscious. We first have to even be aware of what's going on up there. And, the yogis, the Buddhist would call this developing the witness, so that you are able to witness yourself from a more neutral place. You can observe, there's a little space, you can observe what thoughts are going on. So often before we start maybe doing some contemplative practices like meditation, or before we maybe go to therapy and start to examine our thoughts, we are just in many ways at the mercy of those thoughts and those patterns and the stories that we were conditioned into from a young age. We don't even know why we're, spouting off at our boss if we aren't conscious of what's going on inside, if we're not conscious of what the internal space is like. So this is the first step. It all starts here. Self-awareness is the key. And it is something that, takes some practice. So once we start to be able to observe ourselves, observe our patterning, observe our stories, observe our thoughts, then we can start to notice the themes of our mind. And I was with a good friend this week, and we were laughing about, she was telling me about something. She's like, I feel like I was struggling with this 3 years ago. And I was like, I have something similar in my life that I look back on some journals, and I was writing about this a year ago. What's up with this? This is so common that we have this patterning, we have these stories, and we just keep sort of living it out until we become conscious about it and we try to make some changes. There's a well-known psychologist named Dr. Shefali. She's a great quote that we don't live a life, we live a pattern. Right? So we don't live a life, we live a pattern. Right? So what is the pattern? So for myself, I have been able to examine several patterns. I'm sure there are many more, or some more, that I'm unconscious to still yet at this point in my own evolving development. But some of my patterns are the people-pleasing, perfectionism, overworking. Other patterns that I see in people are the rescuer, the savior, the victim. Some people are that eternal adolescent, right? Like they can't get out of like they're 63, but they're still acting like they're 13. Other patterns are like the defender, like they're always defending something. So none of these are bad or wrong, but I mean, they're so human. They're so beautifully human. But it's really helpful for us to start to be able to understand some of the themes or some of the patterns that we find ourselves in over and over, right? So I can be a perfectionist in my kitchen, right? Like I don't want anyone else to like wipe off the counters because I want them wiped a certain way. But I'm also a perfectionist in all these other areas of my life too. So the themes that we start to see usually cross into many arenas in our life. So once we notice the theme, we notice when we get triggered, we start to be able to understand, how is this pattern maybe helping me? How is this pattern hurting me? Those are usually these patterns first rise up because they're trying to be in service to us. They're trying to help us cope or get through something difficult. And then when the theme or the pattern gets painful, it's no longer working. It's no longer helping you, but we have to be able to understand what its original sort of benefit or help was. But then what we have to do, we got to take responsibility for this. This is really, I think, how we purify our mind. We have to take full ownership. There is never anyone on the outside to blame. And I'm going to say that again because it's really important. There is no one on the outside to blame. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't annoying people on the outside that are triggering the themes and the patterns in you that are creating distress and challenge. But there is no one on the outside to blame. So this is the responsibility, that whatever is churning us up, whatever is challenging our mind, whatever is keeping us stuck, we have to step in and say, it's mine, it's full responsibility. I want to read this to you because this has been really helpful for me to keep living into, because it's so much easier to try to control the outside, right? Make everything okay on the outside instead of really doing the hard work of saying, why am I getting stuck? So everything I see comes from my own mind. Everything I feel comes from my own mind. Everything I know others to be comes from my own mind. When I am broken, I interpret the other's brokenness as mine. When I am whole, I interpret the other's brokenness as theirs. So as we get whole, we can begin to get clear on what is ours and what's not ours. And we no longer take things personally. It's such a big one. How do we not take things personally? So these are ways to start to purify the mind. And of course, I'm not going to talk about it today because I talk about it so much, so often, but actually I think it can't be repeated enough that if you really want to purify your mind, hands down, the best is meditation, because meditation, sitting with yourself, watching your thoughts, helps you become conscious. It helps you wake up, helps you notice the themes of your mind, right? So that then you can take responsibility. So meditation, 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 meditation. Start with 5 minutes. You don't have to sit for 30 minutes in lotus pose, 5 minutes. And there are so many good resources. Sean maybe put in the web chat, Insight Timer app. It's my hands down favorite meditation app, which has lots of recorded meditations. It also has a beautiful meditation timer. So this is the way we start to purify the mind. Okay, last image to meditate on. I was going to maybe do, I'm out of time. I was going to maybe do a river meditation, but I'll talk you through just briefly what I wanted you to observe in yourself. Our life is like a river, right? And you can even just take a moment to close your eyes and tune in. What's my flow like right now? Is my river flowing, right? And is the flow a trickle, or is it like a really heavy, forceful flow? And are there any big boulders or blocks in my river that are sort of blocking the flow of this energy that's moving from my pelvis, my tailbone, all the way to my crown? Like, are there any blockages? And is there any information I can receive about those blockages? And then can I envision just this beautiful flow of energy that just keeps moving, no stagnancy, just full flow from the base of the spine to the crown of the head. All right, y'all. That's all I got. That was a lot. Whew. Purification. I'm going to stay on, I know, 12:55. I was looking at my clock, which is 5 minutes fast. I'm going to stay on and answer questions. Does anyone have any particular questions about anything we talked about? And I guess the final thing I want to say is I just threw a lot at you in 1 hour. I also want to acknowledge that I have been playing around with purification practices in my life for a good decade. So for me, a 2-week cleanse feels like really doable because I know this pattern in the spring. But if this all feels overwhelming and like, how do I do this? Like, start small, start to drink more water, start to add 5 minutes of meditation in, do Kapalbhati breath when you first wake up in the morning. This doesn't have to be like some major lifestyle shift. Even just hearing this Wisdom Wednesday today might help you purify some internal blocks, just a realization of like, oh, I've been heavy here. And now that I know it, now that I have consciousness, I can start to make some intentions to move it through. So keep it simple. Don't overwhelm yourself. Also, you have an inherent wisdom that will guide you to the practices and the things that you most need this time of year. Jennifer, are purification and removal of obstacles related? Absolutely. Which is why the idea that we need to purify our bodies, but we need to work with energy in our minds as well. And so what I find, because we're so interconnected, like in terms of our body's not separate from our mind. Like I think even the body mind, that concept is so, it's not quite right because it's all one, it's all connected. That if we do something for our body, or we literally remove an obstacle in our house, changes the flow. It changes the flow in our minds. It changes the flow in our bodies. So whatever you do is going to be of benefit. It's going to impact all the systems. If you clear your mind, it helps your body. If you clear your body, it helps your mind. Like it's all connected. And I hope that's what you meant, Jennifer, but if you didn't, ask me. Sue, thank you. I'm glad. I know I just said to Sean that like every time it's a wisdom, I'm like, okay, what am I going to talk about? And it feels like, and just yesterday I saw someone in there like, I listened to your Wisdom Wednesday last month and it was so good. It was so helpful. And I was like, okay, there is a reason I'm doing this. So thank you, Sue, for saying that. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Alyssa. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Neva. Thanks, Brenda. Thank you all for being live. This does go on YouTube. So if you know anyone in your life that would benefit from hearing this message or just being reminded about lightening up a little bit, purifying, you can send them to that. It'll probably be up in the next day or so. So have them check it out. Thanks, everyone. Have a great first Wednesday of the month. And we will see you all next month. And if you have any great ideas about what you want to hear in Wisdom Wednesday, send us an email at info@heartlandyoga.com and might give some inspiration for next month. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. I don't want to end because I'm enjoying reading all of these comments. My mouse is on in, and I'm like, no, these are such great comments. Really appreciate it. All right, I am signing off now.